in CS Double Major, and this is my IS research project that involves building a virtual modular synthesizer for both MIDI and sine wave input options. On the left here, you have a couple of modules that will be built specifically for these periodic sinusoidal waveforms, in which you can alter the volume and pitch of the waves. And in the middle, there are a couple of options that you can use for these waveforms in addition, such as the major chord generator, which will be a harmonic slider. So you can take that bass note input option you have and add two other sounds on top of it to produce a major chord. In addition to this, we also have a distortion module, which will take that bass note you have and then add a couple of funky sounds and effects to it to make it sound very distorted. Not something I would recommend doing at a high volume because of how weird it sounds, but you're welcome to do whatever you want on your own time with your own devices. And then on the far right, we have a couple of modules that are built specifically for the MIDI protocol, which will stand for the Musical Instrument Digital Interface Protocol. And for this input option, we have some modules on the top that can alter the output sound of MIDI manually. So any changes you want to make to the sound, including making it go from its natural 8-bit form of a pseudo piano to something that's more akin to a clarinet, bass drums, a synth pad, or a regular drum kit, can be done through those 4 sliders. And then later we also see a couple of modules that are taken from classical music, in which we have staccato, which is a directive within classical music that says that you have to play notes in a certain disconnected and distorted kind of way. And then you also have a legato module, which will do the complete opposite and have notes be played very connected in a way that you can't really tell where one note starts and the other ends and things like that. So Libby, if you wouldn't mind coming up and demonstrating for this.
I don't know if just sit down there.
Oh, that's okay. So what you really want to do is play the keyboard we have there. You can play it. Yes, you can. Yeah, and so we'll be playing these keyboard notes here, and as you can hear, they're coming out very nicely. And if you want to take that trackpad and move it to either one of the staccato or legato modules, this will make the notes sound very connected. And you can't really tell where one starts and ends. Same thing with this staccato module, maybe. Turn this one off into the other one. Thank you. You can kind of hear how they're supposed to be very disconnected, and you can clearly hear separation between the notes. Cool. And what you're going to do now is play with the sine wave for me. Is that cool?
Sure.
Coolio. So what you'll hear here is, you could turn that to be the lower when it's
Way lower.
Neither do I.
Okay.
That's fine then. So what you'll see here is a natural periodic sinusoidal waveform. That's the sine wave. It's the one you hear and learn about in a lot of your trigonometry and calculus classes. And so for the first module here, you'll see a volume slider, which will take it from its natural highest volume of whatever it's set to and go down to absolute silence. Libby, if you wouldn't mind doing the sliding.
Yes.
Not the other one, the other slider.
This one?
That one. So it goes from absolute silence to its maximum level.
I'm not going to do that.
You're not going to do maximum, okay. So we have it here at its relatively normal level of 50, and then the pitch module is supposed to change the actual frequency and the pitch of what we hear from 20 hertz to about 20,000 hertz. It's not always accurate in the higher levels because it's a little bit difficult for technology to reproduce those levels, but as you hear, there's a very distinct set of pitches that are used for this module. No. And then let's click that reset button. And then let's go to the choose waveform and start waveform again. And then we're going to go through, no, just that one. Click that, and then you'll click this. And then we're going to go through the other modules that can be used for both of them. First off, we'll start with the major chord generator we have, which, with the way that this is programmed, doesn't necessarily always sound like a perfect major chord, but you can hear how the 2 extra sounds that are layered on top of it produce a more complicated and composite sound. So click that right here. Just click on it. And you can hear how that composite sound, if it were to be played on keyboard, could be considered to be a major chord. And the final module we have for this synthesizer is the distortion module. Nope, let's reset everything and try again. It does this sometimes. I don't.
Start.
Choose start. Distortion. And then for the distortion module, you can really hear how the sound overall turns out to be a little bit funky and not necessarily something you want to hear at a high volume. Turn it off and stop it. And that is this virtual modular synthesizer.
Yay!
Are there any questions?
Margaret,
Thank you.
are there any questions?
She's been here a couple of times.
Really, sorry. I gotta figure out how to get up.
You want help?
Why did you make this?
I've done 5.
Oh,
Yeah, so what you can do is that's where the pathways are really cool. Like the pathways are really cool. You have to select which pages you want to do where you're giving other pieces where you want to tell. I had to decide which page I was going to
Yeah.
friend here. Do you want to play along?
Sure.
Bye, everyone.
Is it live right now?
Yeah, this is Sunya. And why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and stuff since we have the camera, and if you could demo on the iPad, that'd be great.
Okay, so should I start? I'm Gunjan, and I'm a computer science major. I'm a senior, and I'll be demonstrating my senior IS right here. So what I did for my senior IS is I created a tourism application which uses augmented reality, and then it's basically a remote tourism application that teleports you to where I'm from, which is Nepal. So for my AR application, how do I show it?
What do you want to show?
The AR thing. Like, how is it gonna work? Do I just show it in front of the camera?
Yeah.
So if you see the iPad right here, do you mind if I move this? So if you take a look at the iPad right here, you see an augmented teleporter right here, and if you walk towards the teleporter, it gives you a brief description of the various touristic sites in Nepal. The first thing I wanted to show everyone was Mount Everest, and then you have a brief tutorial how to use the sites and stuff, and then it's basically a 360-degree images of the scene. So it shows you the 360-degree images of the scenes, and then at the same time there is is it showing the camera?
Yeah.
So at the same time there is interactive components for each of the scenes, where you have Mount Everest has always faced issues with getting rid of the trash various climbers leave behind. So I thought I'd add a fun little game where you can tap on the trash and then you can dispose of it, and then basically you're advocating for its protection and conservation. The next scene I have is a historical site in Nepal. It's known for its architecture, and then its religious and cultural significance. And then for this scene, this place is a very famous Hindu site. So what I did was I added a bell, because according to Hinduism, that's how you let gods know that you're here to worship him, and then you also have a lamp that you can turn on. So that's how our version of praying. So whenever you're walking to a site, you ring the bell, and then you light a lamp to pray for gods. The next scene I have is Buddhist site, a very famous Buddhist site. This is where apparently, according to folk stories, where Buddha was born. And then there is a temple right here. There's a temple right here that shows you where he was born, and then according to folk stories, as soon as he was born, he walked 7 steps on earth. And then this is a lake where people believe that he was bathed in as soon as he was born. And then there is also an interactive component of Buddha himself, and then if you tap on the Buddha's idol, you can interact with him, where you can see his quotes and stuff. It's basically his wise words, like, so that we can learn from his wise words. And the final piece of architecture side I have is this is a temple known for its architecture, and then if you look at it, this is a very unique architecture where it has a spherical dome with a very pointy head. So I have a very small 3D model of the scene itself, of the temple itself, and then if you interact with the model, you see flowers coming around, and then at the same time, there are also prayer wheels. That this is how the Buddhists get rid of the negative deeds. So that if you tap on the prayer wheels, they start spinning. And so the whole idea behind spinning prayer wheels is you spin prayer wheels to get rid of your negative deeds. So basically, this is what I have: a virtual tourism application that teleports you to Nepal, and then it shows you all the various interactive components. And it shows you an interactive components at the same time. There's audio for each scene, so that it replicates the ambience when you actually are physically present there. So yeah, that's basically my application.
Thank you so much. It's really cool. Thank you so much for the demonstration.
Basically deconstruct but then that subject and process that is used. I'll show like a little bit of this. It's so in this 1997, this fashion was colloquially called lumps and bumps. In 1997, between Kawakubo and Bruce Cunningham, who's the choreographer for this dance, he, as a choreographer, really wanted everyone to dance not in unison, so that it was more like an animal group of animals kind of moving together. And what that does with these outfits is make everyone very, very conscious of where their body is, because more often than not, these lumps and bumps, which is basically like foam and different things around the body, limits movement in many ways, and the body itself will disappear within other people, and you don't really know when the body starts and ends, which is a huge difference. And these dancers will talk about how they, when wearing those costumes and when dancing, they kind of lose their perception of their self and their perception of their own gender within everyone else, because the styles are very genderless.
It seems like they define the movements or something. Like, especially with the body shape and whatnot. It seems like the contradictions.
Exactly.
Sorry.
That's what we're seeing.
All of magazine, right? You said that was. That was the beginning of this.
Pretty much. So, Olive magazine, there's a few different very important magazines, but Olive is probably the most important because it contextualizes and does stuff, because it has literally magazine for romantic girls. And so this changes from... that's right.
You're so long.
I was like, who has a gong? Whose presentation is this part of? What was I going to say? Oh, that this says magazine for romantic girls rather than other different things. So the people that kind of apply their aesthetic to being an olive girl, it's not for sexualization of their fashion or themselves, it's for the romanticization of their aesthetic and of their life, which is a difference. from the norm.
Okay, how did you find these magazine like sources and whatnot? You said you scanned some?
Yeah, so so I started this as a prospectus my junior year, and so I had already found some archives of these magazines junior year through everything, through just looking them up through Instagram, through Pinterest.
This is a Scalar site I wrote as an alternative third chapter to my senior independent study for the history department, which is Archman Nina, journalist with a plan and no loyalty. So Scalar is a visual pathway program, and what's really cool about it is you can take pages and video files and have them interact in new and different ways. That's really valuable for historians to be able to do because it allows you to present primary source material like pamphlets or newsletters, newspapers nowadays, and interact them with each other when previously they might have just been stored in a vault in England 30 feet underground or only available online through a database. So by being able to take those images, put them on a site like this and have them interact with each other, you're able to kind of construct a new kind of argument. What I think is really cool is Scalar has a timeline feature. Let me just get to that page. And this is Needham, the focus of my main argument. Being able to create a timeline though is also really valuable for historians to be able to do because it allows you to present like huge portions of history in conjunction with each other and give you a good idea of how like a timeline would have been structured. And I'm not sure like if there's anything else here.
When I came back, I worked with the curator of the museum over here, and she and I, we photographed various objects which were in the museum. We didn't really know like how they were set up and things like that, so I found like some catalogs, and we kind of went through and worked through the process together, picked our own objects. Following that, I was looking for some paperwork on the things, and I noticed in the archaeology lab, we only had a folder of information. And when I started looking for photos for my museum, I went to Special Collections and there were 35 boxes of paperwork on this stuff. Budgets, correspondence, photos, all of that stuff. So I went through that to give me more information, and I synthesized all that to create this virtual museum that you see here. So I have 6 different galleries in my museum, as well as a gift shop, which has like some of my merch that I've created and stuff like that, like what I'm wearing. And then so you can check that out either through VR glasses, which I have here. I also have all these laptops set up in my museum, so you can like walk around and experience that. There's audio and visual associated with that. And I also have like a projector set up so you can like see it.
I don't know how.
Can we get shirts?
Yeah, where's the swag?
I don't have extra swag. I just have illustration swag. That
You can only visually buy them.
People order your swag.
Yeah.
Support your next page.
It's true. I would wear it.
So.
I know. I have a lot of archaeology friends, so
Okay.
I know it's
little face. Yes.
So you can like view it either on the web browser on your own phone, or you can check it out. Anybody want to check out the VR setup perhaps, or whatever people are interested in.
Oh, I love these.
This is great.
Let me step for 1 second. So like everything I just said?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, ready? Hi, my name is Benson Thompson IV. I'm a senior archaeology major at the college. I did my presentation on what's called partage, which is the legal division process of objects and artifacts from an archaeological site. From 1967 to 1985, Wooster also excavated at the archaeological site of Pella in Jordan. Following that excavation, a professor, he created several different books on the material. But since then, students haven't really been using the material, so I wanted to show light to this and bring stories to the objects. And so what I did was I applied for Copeland funding. I got a chance to go to Jordan, and then I got to see the site that Wooster helped excavate, as well as I had the opportunity to see some of the museums in Jordan, to see the local museums and how they had the artifacts set up to tell their stories. And then I used that and I brought that to me when I came back to campus. Then I worked with people in Ebert Museum, and I got a chance to photograph various objects and things like that. Then I also worked with the Special Collections Department. Initially, the Archaeology Department, we thought we only had a folder of information. We found out that in Special Collections, there's actually 35 boxes of information on this stuff. And so afterwards, I was digging through there. There were contracts, there were photographs, there were all of those things. Actually, Special Collections right here. So that's what I did. And then afterwards, I synthesized all that information and created this virtual museum, which you have here. It has 6 different galleries. I have a VR setup where you can check out VR goggles, VR glasses right here. I have several monitors set up, as well as a projector screen where you can check out my museum. The museum has the galleries that talk about the excavation. It talks about the artifacts. I have a gift shop where it shows like some of my merch that I designed. All of that.
We like the swag.
That's there.
Thank you so much.
Hi. How are you?
This is great.
Thank you.
I had to go to
Failing to do anything about the leaders that are like very conservative and far right. Like the administration that Japan is under is the same that it has been since before World War II. And this Neo generation is like the first to kind of realize that even though they've protested for literally like a decade, that there's no change. And then this creates a bunch of like, yeah, more. Yes. Alright. My name is Brimmer Morrison, and for my independent study, I did Grotesque Cultural Exchange, a study of Japanese fashion history. And so this is my Scalar presentation. It's sort of a digital format of my IS and an image analysis as well. So to start out, for my introduction, I have a timeline here that's very essential to my project. You know, starting in the Meiji period, going going to, the designer that I focus on, Archaeological, is born, and then that moves through different Zen Kyoto literature, different magazines that come up at the time. And you have an introduction here, basically saying what this project is about, why I did it. And then the next page we have is the Scalar gallery layout. And so this basically just has linked pages and images to each other, and you can click the inspector or full screen if you want to kind of blow this up and find very specific things. But for this website, I definitely suggest going through the gallery before coming back to this. And then some definitions here just to help the reader or the viewer see what's going on in my research, sort of what different definitions are, especially like abject, Gothic Lolita, jouissance, Japanese ma, Lolita, mu, and ma. All kind of very important aesthetics and definitions to my project in general. So the big part of this kind of storytelling element, digital storytelling element, is these two galleries. So starting in the 1980s, we have Rie Kawakubo basically making her fashion abject through Paris. So you have things like this leather shoe, this complete deconstruction of what one would consider a shoe at all. Deconstruction of a sweater. So things like this produce subject and process in fashion, where there's basically a collapse of self and other when it comes to clothing. And then that also kind of shows through her architecture, like the stores, how customers will interact with the clothing. It's not just buying it, it's how does one feel in the moment when they're in the store, which sounds a bit odd, but that's what it is. And then going into the 90s, you have even more expressions of subject and process and deconstruction of abject clothing. So you kind of have things like this where you have a cut where the sleeve isn't even in the jacket at all, and you have a difference between the hair and the shoes and the jacket completely. Different things that may be considered grotesque to the fashion industry, like not using actual models on the runway. This is the first runway that's ever happened. And then this is another reason why I really liked using Scalar as a digital platform, is that I can add kind of whatever sort of media I want. So this is a YouTube video that I won't show on here because it's pretty long, but it is of 1997 dance in New York, Scenario by Merce Cunningham, outfits by Comme des Garçons. And things like this really help me show off what I wrote about in my IS, because this takes things like the Lumps and Bumps collection and explores gross positions and shapes of oneself through dance and through the clothing. And then moving on to ads and advertisements. Similar to like what I wrote about in my IS, one of the big things that changed in fashion as a result of Comme des Garçons is this way of advertising a brand as an aesthetic rather than a slogan, or rather than through just a sexualization of the fashion itself. So you have things like this, where like this is in the magazine produced by the brand itself, where you have phrase, and when death comes and he has left the body on these shores. So you have kind of a corpse here and a body here on a shore, and you kind of get to interpret that in general versus being told what the brand means to you. And then this is the second part of my gallery, Lolita Fashion Subcultural Scene. So this takes it through the different magazines that kind of build up both Lolita and shoujo and kawaii cultures in Japan, and sort of add on context from different cultures, creating this vast like cultural capitalism landscape of Japanese fashion. You have a designer character brand revolution where you have brands like Innocent World and Milk produce fashion that finally starts using alter egos of the shoujo and alter egos of kawaii culture to basically place themselves in this aesthetic of how they can be women. And then through that you can produce jouissance through fashion rather than just a subject and process, so pure enjoyment. So you have kind of pages like this in some of the magazines where you have the product description as well as a way to modify the product yourself, which is a whole like different thing that hadn't really been done in a lot of fashion magazines up until that point. And then the end of my project here focuses on Gothic and Lolita Bible, and so this is kind of this pure expression and pure jouissance through fashion, where you have things like this, where you combine different elements of, you know, French dolls and French doll style to like Edwardian and Victorian English style, as well as different Japanese identity politics to create this ultimate fashion expression of Gothic. So yeah.
Thank you so much for the demonstration.
Yes. Yeah, I did.
Like the denim subculture.
Yeah, and so I mostly focused on the Lolita subculture in general, just because of how I sort of wanted to present my own facts, but both the denim subcultures as well as other just fashion subcultures and cultures of Japan are super important to kind of how things evolve in general. So
Yeah. So did you look at, like, because you talked about your test, somebody that stands out from the denim side is like Capital.
Yeah.
Capital stands out as
super.
Right, just taking these things and oversizing them and totally walking out of it.
That's how it is.
Wow, that's actually so you have to pay
So like the influence, when you say that, do you mean like the influence that the movement had on his writing?
Yes, exactly. Like, for example, during Cromwell's period, he was writing, like, what Cromwell told him to write.
Okay.
Like, he was sponsored. He was actually one of the first cases of a journalist being sponsored by government to write about, like, materials. So Cromwell would tell him, go write about this particular thing, and he would write that in journalistic fashion. There had been cases of, like, press regulations where only government officials could, like, publish legally. Obviously, they're illegal publishing in a sense, but Nina was the first instance of a journalist who was sponsored by government to publish things. So that was really interesting to kind of see and study.
Yeah.
Tangle with.
And were you able to broach like what his authentic voice really was? Or was there one ruler that was particularly hands off compared to the other?
So he definitely preferred, he wasn't really a fan of monarchies both times. He wrote for monarchies with Charles I and Charles II. He wrote for Charles I because Charles I was thrown in jail and threatened to kill him unless he wrote for Charles I. Before that, Needham had actually been writing more in support of democratic ruling, like parliamentarian style. And so when Cromwell kind of approached him, was like, hey, do you want to write for me or do you want to like go back to prison and possibly, you know, be banished or killed or whatever? That's when Needham really kind of took his place. And actually there was this transformation during the 10 years he was writing for Cromwell where he was less writing like politics and more just writing about the fears of the world. And that's why Needham's really like a newsman source. He's a journalist fundamentally. And he was kind of, I think that's probably his truest voice where he just wants to write about the politics of the world. And he definitely is not in favor of monarchy. You can kind of tell that, but we don't exactly have any personal writings of Needham. It's all for like publicly available materials, like stuff he would have printed for the public. So that could make it a little bit difficult to judge, like, is this actually what he's supporting of? But because he does write in an objective voice, like, here's the news from Denmark nowadays, it is kind of interesting to see like how his own opinions differ.
Yeah. And when you were doing your research, what sources did you use to get at his writing, like to access his writing?
So I'm going to use Early English Books Online, which is a database that the Wooster has a subscription to. It is a paid database, so if I just come here, I would have been able to use that. And that was kind of interesting to interact with because I just totally stumbled across Needham. I didn't like do any searches for him. I just kept seeing his name come up every time I was looking at newsletters and pamphlets in 17th century, and I was like, oh, he seems important. It's like the first time I've seen his name.
Oh, that's cool.
And a lot of pamphlets don't have names associated with them, so that was really interesting. That's actually kind of my second chapter where I looked at how, like, okay, I used the digital archive in this particular manner, and it influenced my thesis to this point. So that was kind of interesting to see, and then I took that and actually put it in practice here as well.
So yeah, that's awesome. Well, great job. This is really neat. It's nice to see the visualization.
Yeah, Scalar's really cool because like there's ones that you can put into the site and there's others that you can just conjure up using like different data about the site. Like for example, the word cloud is one of the cooler ones. Like this is the how often certain words appear. And I didn't do this. It's Scalar just going in and looking at the book itself. That's what they call the site, and kind of pulling out this different data about the site.
Politicus.
Yeah. Politicus is one of the Mercurius Politicus is one of the newsletters he wrote, so that one was mentioned a lot. But yeah, then you can also do the regular visualization. Yeah, this is like how all the different pages are related. You can like structure it to show like different ways the data will connect. The radial is also really cool.
So what are you seeing here?
So you have to set the parameters, and then this is the pages. These are all the pages that are currently on my site, most of which are visible, some of which are not.
And just to define, so pages that include throughout his career, that's the span of his career.
No, pages in this sense is the pages I created. So Scalar's kind of like a blog. Whenever you create like the next page on it, that's like the next page on the site. So these are the pages that are on the blog but might not all be visible. This is how they connect to the other things. Like, these are all the timeline pages over here. So this is not about the materials. The media, those are like the materials. And these are how all the media files factor in. There's different ways you can play around with this and see how they interact with each other. Force directed, that's the one I have like on my main page. And by saying the parameters, you can see the different ways it interacts. Pages. Like if you don't put the connections, and they're just a bunch of little bubbles, but when you put like, I think it's all path. That's when you this is where Scalar becomes a little bit tricky. If you don't know where to click, there you go. So this is just like, it'll pop up like that.
Oh, okay. So create different branches.
Yeah.
This work. Okay. Nice.
about 70 hours total to do all of the back, the writing, the back end work, and just work on a period. I was lucky enough to take a half credit workshop in fall semester, like of my senior year, and that, you know, really helped me understand how to use Scalar and how to like operate within its parameters. And then over break, I did a lot of like the back end stuff, metadata, and creating, you know, tags, and just, you know, the boring stuff that's like really supporting all of this. And then this semester, that's where I got more into the fun stuff of writing the text and making it all look pretty and adding like the photos in the way I wanted to. So that was definitely fun.
That's great. Well, this is really fantastic. Thanks for walking me through it.
Yeah, no, it's a great resource, and I hope like it's not just limited to history. You can just like say you have pictures of Wooster around campus, and like different locations on campus. You can take those different photos and like create like a map of campus, like a visual kind of online exhibit.
We should have you help us with our. I work in the marketing office, so we should have you help us with our campus photography.
That exactly. You could do something really cool with campus photography. Because another thing, I didn't do it on that because it wasn't really relevant. You can create a map and like tie certain media files into locations on a map. So if you like click on a place on the map, if I had a map on here, it would pop up with a photo like that. So like click on Calc, a photo of Calc, and like different photos associated with Calc will pop up.
That's awesome. And then you could tell the history of what happened over the years too.
Yeah,
it's great.
Yeah, it's a great resource.
Well, congratulations, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for stopping by.
Yeah.
This is also technology may not always actually reach those higher resolutions beyond about 12 kilohertz. So what we hear is something starting from its absolute most of 20 hertz and theoretically reaches as high as 20 kilohertz, but not necessarily in actuality. And so additional modules that are used for this involve a distortion module, which will make it sound very unpleasant to listen to for extended periods of time, which doesn't work for this right now. Try that again. Which you can hear is very much not something that we're listening to in high volumes or much at all. Additionally, we have a chord generator, which creates a composite sound that kind of sounds pleasant overall, but not necessarily, again, something you want to hear for an extended period. Over on the sound that accepts MIDI inputs, we also have options to affect the overall sound with the first four sliders up there, in addition to those counter modules. So Jenna, if you wouldn't mind being my demonstrator for this purpose.
Sure. So I get to play the piano?
You get to play the piano.
Oh, right.
Short and piano. That's like piano.
So what you'll see here is Jenna plays this little MIDI keyboard.
Can I play anything?
Yeah. Play anything you like. Is that naturally it'll sound a little much like a piano might with a regular keyboard? Yeah, keep going. So that would be its natural sound of it. Eventually, once we hit one of these two, you play whatever you want. If we were to hit the legato module, all these notes would sound very much connected to each other, and it's very hard for somebody to play and be able to do successfully. On the other hand, if we were to implement the staccato module for the sound, you can kind of hear how the notes between the playing of one note and the playing of the next note are starting to be separated between their starting position points in time. And then these other sliders, Jenna, if you want to play with those sliders on top, will also affect the sound output of the sliders on top of here, using the computer strap pad.
Oh, okay.
The ones that say attack, decay, sustain, release. Whoa! And if you do a couple of changes to these four sliders, it will eventually sound like something like maybe a synth pad, a drum kit, a bass guitar, or anything else you'd really want it to sound like. So sustain. So as you can see what Jen is doing, sustain and release will typically make it sound much more like a synth pad or something that will be in the lower registers of a pop song. And yeah, keep playing with it. Whoa, this is awesome. I know how to play. Yeah.
case anyone was wondering. Whoa. Okay. Do you have any suggestions as to like, or do you have a favorite ratio between the intensity and the sustain?
Not necessarily, no. That ultimately just changes the timbre of the instrument that you might be looking to go for.
If I was going for a softer sound, what would I choose?
Softer in which way?
Like a softer sound, like something that's more gentle. It's less like guitar and more like
You would probably want to increase the attack a little bit and decrease the decay. Let's see. And this is what's going to give you the sound that's more equivalent to a synth pad or maybe a bass guitar if you were to push the octave into a lower register, which is.
Cool, thanks for sharing.
Of course.
What's next for you after graduation?
Right, this question, it's amazing. I have accepted a job offer with Amazon to start working full time for them and also plan to pursue a master's in CS at NYU School of Engineering.
Cool, congratulations.
Thank you.
Please keep in touch with the folks in the department.
I
We'd love
plan
to
to,
hear what our
yes.
students are doing. And, you know, like the students that were back yesterday, I mean, it may be just a few years and you've already got a lot to share with
Right, yeah.
current students on your group. I think it's really cool you prepared to see some music.
Thank you.
Sort of fits with my house. My wife was a music major and I did that first.
So it's a really interesting combination.
It
You
is.
do a lot
It
with
is, yeah. Well, congratulations.
Thank you so much. And continue. Oh my gosh.